In today's remarkable exploration, we'll dwell into the hidden narratives of faded photographs, unlocking the stories and emotions behind each cherished frame. Here we are with the 40 vintage photos from the early 1900s that you don't want to miss. So prepare to be transported to an era brimming with charm and mystery as we unravel the secrets and untold tales concealed within these vintage treasures. Let's dive straight in. This historical photograph of the Navy and Army was captured in the early 1990s, during the industrial manufacturing of rifles. Time changes everything, but what doesn't change with time is eternal love. This heartwarming picture of American soldiers sharing one last kiss with their partners before leaving for Egypt in 1963. This photograph depicts Gemini 8, NASA's sixth crewed spacecraft which launched on March 16, 1966. A critical in-space system failure of a US spacecraft resulted in the astronauts being stranded in the sea. Fortunately, the entire crew was saved. The next picture will blow your mind to some extent. In the 1920s, when swimwear was becoming popular, the beach official would use tape to measure the visible flesh in inches. If the swimwear was not sufficiently covered, the person was obliged to cover up or go home. Here is another strange photograph from the 1920s. This woman was detained for wearing a one-piece bathing suit. Swimming was a luxury activity in the early 20th century, but severe rules forbade women from wearing short clothes or skimpy swimsuits. The skates you see in this photo are from 1910. Earlier models didn't have brakes and were difficult to drive. 17 years later, the first patented roller skates were invented. They were just ice skates with wheels instead of blades. In this image, you see Brookie, the tallest horse ever recorded. The Red Rowan Belgian stallion born on Earl Brown's farm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was 3,200 pounds and 6 feet 6 inches tall. This picture of three men doing acrobats at the top of the world's highest building of that time will surely give you goosebumps. This photograph was taken in 1934, and the acrobats are named Charlie Smith, Jimmy Kerrigan, and Jewel Waddick. This disturbing image of the Montparnasse derailment in 1895 is not to be missed. The Granville-Paris Express was late, and due to its high speed, the air brake failed to stop it. The accident took the life of a woman. The next image is one perfect example of both bravery and stupidity. This American construction worker seemed walking between life and death by walking blindfolded across a plank between two beams at a height of over 20 stories. This image goes back to the 1920s, a time when swimmers often used full-face swimming masks called facekini. The idea was to shield your skin and minimize drag when swimming, though the swim cap eventually took their spot. In 1968, at the tender age of 13, Debbie Fields became one of the first ball girls for the Oakland Athletics. While her father worked as a welder for the Navy and her mother stayed home to take care of their 5 kids, Debbie was earning $5 an hour to retrieve grounded balls. We think of Sonny and Cher as the couple that went to stardom as a singing duo, but that's not how it all started. They went from America's sweethearts to bitter rivals to celebrities who are uniquely successful from one another, without the ability to extract themselves from their past as a duo. Take a look at this photo. You're not just looking at some hot rod groupie. This is Jungle Pam, queen of the funny car circuit. But she wasn't born Jungle Pam, rather she spent her early years as Pamela Hardy. Stay tuned to be transported to a different time and place with these breathtaking vintage photos. You're in for a nostalgia-filled treat. 1967's Valley of the Dolls has been described as a dirty soap opera capable of the most offensive and appalling vulgarity ever thrown up by any civilization. And it's also a whole lot of campy fun. This may look like a wild, woolly stranger, but you're not looking at some banjo-carrying desperado. This wild and crazy guy is Steve Martin, one of the greatest entertainers of all time. Before he was the star of Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro was a taxi driver. This shot comes from Life magazine's pictorial A Night with the Millers, which supposedly shows what it was like to live with Marilyn Monroe and her third husband, playwright Arthur Miller. Pictured here with his second wife, Jill Ireland, Charles Bronson was a serious man's man. Fans of Brigitte Bardot know that it is rare to see her as a brunette, even though she was born with brown hair. In 1956, she bleached it for an Italian film and never went back. After starring in 3 films together, it makes sense that Elvis and Anne Margaret developed some serious chemistry, but he was with Priscilla at the time and didn't want to break things off. Audiences first noticed Alyssa Milano when she played Samantha on Who's the Boss, opposite Tony Danza. The TV series MASH found comedy in the struggle of the Korean War for 11 years between 1972 and 1983. Star of the Champions, one of the weirdest British shows about the occult to come out of the 1960s, Alexandra Bastedo is one actress whose work has flown under the radar through the 20th century, despite her appearances in films. For a few brief years, the beach movie was one of the most beloved genres of films for teenagers giddy on their chance to get out of the house and go to the theater all by themselves. And it all started with Beach Party. Was anyone ever as young as Christina Applegate and Brad Pitt in the 1989 VMAs? Even today, Brigitte Bardot is considered to be one of the most beautiful women in the world. If there's any proof to the age-old adage that musicians get chicks regardless of how attractive they are, it's the marriage of Billy Joel and Christy Brinkley. The Yes campaign made a meal out of their Europe or Bust shirts that were definitely pointed at the world's love of the chest. But there was also a No campaign that had a less sexy slogan, Out and Into the World. In 1978, Bruce Springsteen was on one of the most important tours of his life. From May 1978 to January 1, 1979, Springsteen played 115 shows and hit major markets, college towns, and everywhere in between to preach the gospel of the boss. These vintage photos hold a secret that will leave you in awe, so let's unearth some interesting backstories to these photographs. When Catherine Switzer was 20, she resolved to run the Boston Marathon. Roberta Gibb had gate-crashed and finished the race the previous April. In 1967, she had a phone number. At the time, it was an all-male race. Women were not allowed to run, and organizers mocked them repeatedly to escape suspicion. She signed the relevant documentation using her initials. The Statue of Liberty, like the Eiffel Tower, is difficult to envisage as anything other than a timeless giant. Of course, it was a human-made statue, and France delivered it to the United States in 214 cartons for an estimated $10 million, adjusted for inflation. On April 15, 1865, just 6 days after the Civil War ended, with the surrender of Appomattox, John Wilkes Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln. 4 days later, on April 19th, members of the funeral procession marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. According to an overly simplified account of events, on June 28, 1914, Serbian patriot Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo, igniting World War I. Sally Mann was selected America's Best Photographer by Time magazine in 2001. Her photos included intimate but disputed images of her children, with 25% of them naked. In many ways, technological advances pioneered by Thomas Edison and other well-known 19th century inventors helped shape modernity. The photograph, light bulb, and motion picture camera, all innovations attributed to Thomas Edison, provided people with new ways to preserve and convey the human experience for ourselves and future generations. The Armenian genocide was not so much not photographed as it was so marginalized in history text that any image was a shocker to most people. An Armenian woman kneels over her deceased child in Aleppo, Syria. Children took part in the annual White House Easter egg roll, which was begun by President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1878. Scaffolding and hoists are used to carve Thomas Jefferson's visage into Mount Rushmore. It took 11 years to build this huge artwork. That's all for now. Give a big thumbs up if you enjoyed watching the video, and for more exciting content, please like and comment below to let us know what you wish to see. Subscribe to the channel for more such content, and we'll see you in the next one.